Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Plan Commission, Skokie Plan Commission meeting for March 21st. First order of business will be to ratify the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a
So moved.
so moved? Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes have been approved. Okay. Tonight we have 5 cases that are all related. Cases 2019-02, a zoning map amendment at 3722 Avenue and 2727 Hamlin. 2019-03P subdivision, also at the same addresses. Case 2019-04P, site plan approval, also at the same addresses. And 2019-05, a special use permit for 3754 Tui, and 2019-06P, a special use permit, also at 3754 Tui Avenue. Is the petitioner here tonight? And who will come up and speak? If you'll give us your name and your address, sir.
Good evening, Chairman and Planning Commissioners and staff. I am Tim Haig with Skokie Development LLC and Keystone Ventures LLC. Skokie Development LLC is the petitioner and the development entity for this proposed project.
Do you have a legal address?
Yes, sir. 418 Clinton Place, River Forest, Illinois, 60305.
Okay. Could you raise your right hand, sir? Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you?
Yes.
Yes. I believe our counsel has a question about the notice. So if you
Sure.
would take over, Counselor?
We had spoken before the meeting began, and I know that your office had submitted on March 4th a whole bunch of addresses that notice was mailed to. Then they were notified that 3 addresses were missing. I have an email from Mr. Gordon saying that he had sent those notices out by March 6th. And when we spoke, you were aware, at least according to conversations with council, that notice was in fact sent on the 6th of March as well.
That's correct.
So if you could just supplement with us an affidavit to that effect eventually, we'll be fine. So notice is proper and correct.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay. What I'd like to do, since all these cases are related, if you could perhaps, the zoning map amendment and the subdivision, why you are requesting that, and then if you could just go into the site plan and the your request for the special use for both restaurants. Okay?
Thank you. And just before I start, I want to introduce here tonight is Michael Fitzgerald of OKW Architects, Scott Johnson from Spaceco Engineering, and Michael Worthman from KLOA.
Will they be giving testimony?
Yeah, they'll help respond to any
Okay.
questions. So
Could I ask them to stand and I'll swear them in? Gentlemen, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you? Thank you, gentlemen.
So we're here tonight to propose the redevelopment of 3 properties located in the northeast quadrant of Tui and Hamlin. The properties are identified by their street addresses as 3720 Tui, 7227 Hamlin, and 3721 Chase Avenue. Combined, these 3 properties total about 4.25 acres. They're occupied by older industrial buildings. You might have noticed that we've demolished the building that was previously located at 3720 Tui, which fronts, thank you, Steve, which fronts Tui. And we're proposing to completely demolish all the improvements at 7227 Hamlin, which is the property immediately north of the BP gas station, and then completely renovate the building at 3721 Chase Avenue. That building in its current configuration is about 38,200 square feet footprint, and then there's an additional 5,000 to 6,000 square feet of a mezzanine level at the north end. What we're proposing to do as part of that complete renovation of the building is to reduce that footprint down to about 31,860 square feet by demolishing that north portion of it, including the second floor office space. Chairman Luke, as you identified the 5 actions that we're here seeking tonight, do you want me to summarize those, or can we
Just
just?
summarize that, yeah, the zoning map and
Okay.
the subdivision,
So-
sort of lump that together and then.
So the 5 measures we're here tonight to ask for your consideration and support for, and ultimately your recommendation for, is a zoning map amendment for the 2 front properties, again, 3720 Toohey and 7227 Hamlin. You may recall, we were in a couple of years ago and went through the same procedure for the Chase Avenue building because we had some businesses interested in it. So the 2 front properties are still zoned M3 Industry, and we're seeking to rezone those to a B2 Commercial, similar to we did previously with the Chase Avenue property. The second measure is a subdivision for these 3 properties. They presently constitute 5 separate lots, and we're going to propose a new subdivision of 4 lots. The third measure will be the site plan approval. And then there's an adjunct of some relief on 3 sign ordinance measures. I'm not quite sure, Chairman Luke, if that falls under the site plan approval or one of the special uses, so excuse me on that measure. And then there's 2 associated, the 4th and 5th ones are 2 associated special use permits that we're asking you to consider. The first one deals with a drive-through component to the Bona Restaurant, which we're proposing along Hamlin Avenue. And then the second one is also associated with the Bona Restaurant, and that is for an outdoor dining area in front of the restaurant.
So if you could give us a kind of an overview of your entire project.
Okay. So Skokie Development LLC is proposing to redevelop these properties with the 3 buildings identified in the site plan. The Bona Restaurant that I just referred to, that's being proposed as a 4,700 square foot freestanding restaurant. Bona Restaurant is a family-owned chain here in Chicago. They're up to about 24 restaurants. They've been in business since 1980. It's described by the Bonavolonto family as a upscale fast casual restaurant with a couple of signature sandwiches that they really like. Their Italian beef sandwich, Italian sausage, and then they serve a pepper and egg sandwich on Fridays. They have a very diverse menu, a lot of salads. They also serve Neapolitan pizza and several sandwiches and panini sandwiches. It's done in a nice, warm family environment. They consider themselves a family institution and establishment. And they're proposed for the building on Hamlin, identified as Building B. Building A along Toohey Avenue, this is, we don't have an occupant for this building yet. This is being proposed as 10,500 square feet. We're hypothetically showing a division of this building, leasing a portion of it up to 3,500 square feet for restaurant space and 7,000 square feet for retail, non-restaurant space. And we'll get into, as we talk about the parking, we'll have a little bit further discussion on that. And then the northern building is the known today as 3721 Chase, that we commented that we're going to modify the square footage of. That's being proposed for a medical facility. We're working through that document with that potential user. It would be utilized by one tenant and leased to a sole tenant. There was, as we're working through our documentation with this prospective tenant, we've been bound to some confidentiality. Notwithstanding that, there was an article published, maybe some of you have seen it, but we're still adhering to that confidentiality. So I'll refer to that tonight as the medical facility. From what we understand in some of our preliminary conversations with them, I'm sorry for the awkwardness of that, but it's,
It's already in the picture.
it is. There is, from what we understand, they're still working through some design elements that we're asking for a little bit of a flexibility in terms of some of the exterior things, where the entrance door is going. They believe that will be on the west elevation of the building at about the midpoint, but they are still completing some design exercises and refining that. We have not received that information. We've discussed that with staff and are willing to share that with staff in the village, obviously, as soon as we receive it. What they did reference in their application of the Certificate of Need to the state of Illinois is that the clinical portion would be a smaller element of the space and occupy 10 to 11%. And then within that application, they kind of define the balance being non-clinical. So we'll have to work with them and your staff. And again, this will come up as we talk a little bit about the parking, on what that determination really looks like. So just a couple of brief comments on the rezoning. As you all are familiar with, many of the properties north of Toohey and south of Chase have been redeveloped from their older industrial base to new retail, restaurant, and service employment uses. These properties include the adjacent Walmart, Toohey Marketplace immediately to the east, the Lowe's Home Improvement Store on the south side of Toohey, Export Fitness, and Skokie Commons, the Mariano's anchored development further east. So we're continuing this process of proposing to redevelop the older industrial properties with new retail, restaurants, medical, and service uses. Trend that has witnessed some successful development, has shepherded through by the village of Skokie and the village of Lincolnwood. As the older industrial properties between Toohey and Chase have been redeveloped to their higher and better use, has new retail and restaurants, these properties have dramatically increased in property value, which we think is a positive thing for the community and the area. We look to continue this trend and have a positive effect on surrounding property values. While the current comprehensive plan, the 2005 comprehensive plan, does not jive with this use, it actually references this as Sector E, the southeast portion, suggesting that it should be still manufacturing and service employment. Clearly, a trend has been established and precedent set with the village that would support the rezoning. If you look probably from Hamlin being the kind of the western boundary to this trend, all the way east to Kedzie over the past several decades, the majority of that property has been rezoned and reused and redeveloped, consistent with what we're proposing. The subdivision, which if I could, thanks, Steve. So this is the current condition depicting the 5 lots, and then what's being proposed is redrawing these lot lines somewhat.
Let's get this north and south, right? That's the current condition.
That's the current condition. Is that a better? And then what we're depicting here is Lot 1 being the lot that would be occupied by the Bona Restaurant, and then that appendage to the north extending east would be the area where their drive-through would enter the queuing process, and then also include a point of access on Hamlin. Lot 2 would be utilized for a common parking area, and that's also the lot and the portion of the parking lot where we're going to construct an underground stormwater detention vault. Lot 3 would be the northern lot where the proposed medical facility would go. Some associated parking, and then at the north end, the access point to Chase Avenue, and then also in the southeast corner of this Lot 3 would be a cross-access point to the Walmart development to the east. And then Lot 4 would be the proposed 10,500 square foot multi-tenant retail building. There's 2 dedications that go along with this plat. On the south edge of it, we're dedicating 17 feet to the Toohey Avenue right-of-way, so that pursuant to the village code, the north half of that can go to 50 feet. This is consistent with what happened with the Walmart development. And then at the north end, we're dedicating 12 feet of Chase Avenue, which completes the southern portion of that to a width of 33 feet, consistent with village code. It helps us reconcile a couple of things. It helps us align those sidewalks with the enhanced sidewalks that were constructed as part of the Walmart development. The multi-purpose path along Tui is a little bit wider, I believe it's 8 feet, than a typical sidewalk. So that'll let us continue this throughout the frontage of our property. And similarly, up on Chase Avenue, it'll bring that sidewalk a little bit further south to align with the sidewalk to the east, thus creating a new parkway between the sidewalk and Chase Avenue, which doesn't exist today, that can be landscaped and a couple of trees can be planted there. So those are the highlights of the subdivision. For the site plan approval, I guess I'd like to touch on a couple of things, and please let me know if I'm going into too much detail or if you just want the overview. So we've generally walked around the site plan to give you a concept of what that looks like. What I'd like to do perhaps is just highlight a couple of the exterior building elevations. So I'll start with the Bona building. Is it better if I leave it this way? This way, okay. So this is a rendering of what the exterior of the Bona restaurant will look like. We have, as part of your village process, we did appear before the Appearance Commission and go through all the architecture of the building and the signage, and we did receive unanimous support for those measures. So this is all face brick and stone. The tower of the Bona building is actually constructed out of a Nietzsche board that appears like it's the older barnwood board. And then on the southern elevation, the eastern elevation, and the northern elevation, they utilize a brick that's very similar to the old Chicago common brick. And then on the eastern elevation is kind of a higher gloss, darker brick, darker gray brick. And then one comment that the Appearance Commission had was they wanted us to continue that on the east elevation because there was some relationship to that east elevation and where that point of cross access is going east into the Walmart development. So as somebody might shop between the two properties, that would help enunciate that use when they entered the property. So we included that. Part of the architecture of this, and then there's some steel components you see coming off the southern facade there to highlight the entrance, and then also acting as a protective canopy for the outdoor dining area. And some of the genesis of the architecture for this building with the Bonavolonto family is really kind of trying to return it back to its roots of their signature product, the beef, and being reflective of kind of that meat packing type of building architecture. And then go to this one next. These are elevations of the Chase Avenue building. So what we're trying to do with the complete renovation of that building is utilize the existing shell of the building, introduce some significant window and door fenestrations along the southern elevation, which is at the bottom of this sheet, and the northern elevation at the top. The middle elevation is a western elevation. It's highlighted by, again, including some new windows, maintaining the upper glass block decorative features, and then introducing some canopy elements in relationship to the window fenestration. These are the elevations for the front building, Building A, which would be positioned along Tui. So at the top of the page, we have the north elevation. The middle section shows the two sides, if you will, the west and the east elevation. And then the southern elevation is at the bottom of the page. As you'll note, we've treated all elevations of this building as fronts with significant storefront. And again, highlighted with the opportunity for some decorative canopies. And then there's some architectural steel canopies located at the west and the northwest elevation, as you see. Some of the conversation we had with village staff, and then it was reiterated at the Appearance Commission, was the importance to have some fenestration within this building, and then the encouraging sensitivity of how we lease it and how we design these stores, so that we don't get a situation where the stores are backing up to the south elevation of the building and blocking that glass. So we will be sensitive to that as we proceed.
I have one question.
Yeah.
But it's something I noticed. Obviously, the front is going to be the north facade, and the back and the south is the faux storefront material, which is fine. But
Yeah.
what can you do, what are you intending to do to prevent that from being blocked off, that glass that is facing south to Tui, that will be so obviously the back of the property, with all the parking to the north, as it will be, and all the people entering to the north, and all the stores, therefore, restaurants or whatever the uses are facing to the north? How can you prevent those tenants from not putting up what we've seen so frequently, which is?
It's never easy, quite frankly, with the users. We've developed a number of these buildings in different municipalities, and I was part of the development partnership that redeveloped the Skokie Theater on Skokie Boulevard, and we had a similar situation when we brought, Portillo's up to the road and then the adjacent building, and it is a bit of a struggle. We had better success recently. We developed a series of buildings in the city of Berwyn at Harlem and Cermak, and they had the same urban design principles where we were bringing the building up there, thus forcing really facade elevations on all the sides. So it's always a conversation with the users, and what we strive to do is try to encourage them to use dual entrances. A lot of operations that's not conducive to. It's difficult with restaurant operations. What we did with Starbucks as an example in Berwyn is they wanted their main entrance to face the parking lot. In this scenario, that would be the north elevation, as you referenced. And then the south elevation, we had them inset their kind of back of house wall 6 feet, and they built a counter along that window and put up some stools, had a functioning door, and then they also created a secondary patio out that way. So we are mindful of that as we lease these spaces and talk to them. One thing that we discussed with village staff was, the sensitivity of trying to locate some of that back of the house stuff on those interior common walls, as opposed to just pushing it to one end north or south of the building. We do get pushback from users on a lot of that because of security reasons and just trying to capture and better coordinate the customer experience as they enter the businesses. Chipotle comes to mind, who we also have in Berwyn, and they're very particular when a customer enters their business, how they want them routed through the ordering line before they enter in the seating area. And so it is a bit of a challenge with some users, but I think there are some creative things that you could do with that to preserve that. Sometimes we end up leasing some of the users a little bit more space than they want and adjusting the economics of it so that we can do those kind of creative things like I referenced with Starbucks to create that. So then, jumping back to the site plan, I'd like to talk about parking just for a bit here as part of the site plan approval. So this proposed plan indicates approximately 260 total vehicles. As we looked at the village staff parking analysis chart, the required parking was 260 stalls as well. So I will say we show up tonight meeting code, but there's going to be a couple of things as we got into some of the details with staff through this process that are probably going to adjust that total, and I'll speak to that. And first, let me identify what these are. The first one is the final determination of the ADA accessible parking requirements for the medical facility tenant in Building C. There are some state requirements for outpatient medical facilities that require a 10% of the parking required for that use to be ADA accessible. If we apply both the Village of Skokie code to this building as well as what the user is looking for, I think the requirement is 16 handicap stalls, yeah. And the total would be 160 then allocated to that use. So to accommodate that within the current site plan, we would thus lose 8 stalls. So that's one impact that might influence that. Again, we're working through what those details are with that use, and we'll reach that final determination with your village staff accordingly. Another one is per section 118-220, loading space is required for Building C and Building A. We do depict a loading area at the northeast corner of Building A that does meet the requirements of being 10 by 25 feet and a clear height of 12 feet and out of any drive aisle. We had some changes due to the fluid nature of the interest from the medical facility use, so we haven't corrected that at the north end, and that's one of the things that we're working through with village staff, so we think that might cost us another parking stall or two. And then there's some work to be done on the geometry of that parking lot at the north end. We've worked through village staff and understood kind of the geometry that they want to see. And what we'd like to do is just speak through it verbally tonight. We'll move forward and correct this and provide the appropriate dimensions on this detail, and then reconcile that with village staff. I think one of the adjuncts coming out of here has village staff and Steve noted in the staff report was this is going to generate another request for relief. And that relief is going to be that 6-foot landscape buffer at the north end. So without getting into too much detail, the geometry that we're seeking here, from the new north edge of the building going north, we're going to have a 7-foot wide sidewalk, 6 inches higher than the elevation of the parking lot. And then moving north, both rows of parking will be 17 feet dimensionally north to south. The one-way drive aisle will be 13 feet wide. And then we were initially seeking to create a 6-foot wide landscape buffer between that 6-inch curb at the north end of the parking lot and the new relocated sidewalk that came south. So some interesting things happen. Chase Avenue, as it goes east to west, comes a little further south. So the way that this geometry works out, and we'll, again, go through staff and provide all these dimensions, we end up with about 9 feet of availability at the east end for that landscape area, and then it tapers down to about 2 or 3 feet. So that will be one of the points of relief that we're seeking. The good news is I think we'll have the opportunity for a continuous strip of landscaping there. It'll just be a little wider at one end than the other. So as we refine these issues with the village, we understand that there may be an implication of what and how that front multi-tenant building functions. Again, as part of our parking calculations of the 260 stalls, we initially assumed that we were going to have 3,500 square feet of restaurant space there, and the balance of that space, 7,000 square feet, being retail space. So the breakout of that, and I think this is relevant, if you'll just bear with me for a second, this is the analysis generated by the village. And you can see that we've applied a higher parking requirement allocated at 3,500 square feet. So as we work through these final issues of the parking count to meet code, we understand that one of two things may happen. We may be required to reduce the size of that building within the footprint that we're showing today, or perhaps have less of an opportunity for restaurant space in that. And so we will move forward and reconcile that parking count to meet code within the variables of those two things. So jumping back to traffic, just to highlight a couple of things as we look at this. So the site is bounded by Toohey Avenue on the south, Hamlin on the west, Chase Avenue on the north, and the Walmart Toohey Marketplace on the east. I'll just recite a couple of some of the factual information that was included in the KLOA traffic report. Toohey Avenue is an east-west minor arterial roadway with 2 lanes of traffic in each direction in the vicinity of the site. Toohey Avenue is under the jurisdiction of Illinois Department of Transportation, IDOT, and carries an annual average daily traffic volume of 25,800 vehicles a day, has most recently reported in the IDOT maps, which are dated 2014. So that might be slightly higher, and has a posted speed limit of 35 miles an hour. A parking lane is provided on the north and south side of Toohey Avenue west of Hamlin, and then parking is not permitted on the north side of Toohey east of Hamlin. Hamlin Avenue is a north-south collector road with 1 lane of traffic in each direction. Hamlin is under the jurisdiction of the village of Skokie. To the north of Toohey and the village of Lincolnwood to the south of Toohey. North of Toohey, Hamlin Avenue is classified as a minor collector road by IDOT and carries an average of 1,800 vehicles per day. Parking on Hamlin is prohibited at the west side of the road, and staff in the staff reports, you'll also note that they identify to us that the west edge of Hamlin is the extent of the Skokie boundary. So beyond that curb line is privately owned property by the village of Lincolnwood. And then parking is allowed on the east side of Hamlin, except for weekdays between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., so most workdays. Chase Avenue is an east-west local roadway under the jurisdiction, again, of the village of Skokie. Parking is permitted on the north side of Chase, but prohibited on the south side of Chase. We're proposing that access will continue from the surrounding streets of Toohey, Hamlin, and Chase. Toohey Avenue driveway is opposite Ridgeway Avenue. On Hamlin Avenue, the 2 former curb cuts that served Bosworth Company will be consolidated into 1 curb cut. And then on Chase Avenue, the driveway servicing the existing commercial building at the north end will remain in its current configuration, in its current location. Further cross-access easement has been provided, and we have documented that with the Walmart development leading to the east. So in their report, KLOA touched upon some roadway improvements that they're suggesting and we're working through. Thank you for your help here. So I'll just highlight these, and they're really, there's really 4 main elements to this. The first element is the southern approach of Hamlin as it gets down to Toohey. In its current configuration, again, it's 1 lane of traffic in each direction. What KLOA has suggested would enhance the performance of this is if we could expand that roadway a little bit to the east. That's the purple curb line that's drawn, which does come a couple feet into the parkway. And then that gives us the ability to create a dedicated left-hand turn lane and then 1 lane of through and right turn traffic as it approaches to Toohey. The other 3 measures deal with left-hand turn lanes in the Toohey right-of-way. they're proposing in a left-hand turn lane for eastbound Tui traffic to go north on Hamlin, and then also for westbound Tui traffic to go southbound on Hamlin, so those would be juxtaposing left turn lanes. And then to the east, creating another left-hand turn lane that would align with Ridgeway and the access point into the development from Tui. In its current configuration, it's interesting, that curb cut on Tui that exists today is kind of a wide curb cut. It straddled both of those properties. And so we'll reduce the width of that. And then the traffic leaving that, the point of egress will be under stop sign control. So to accomplish this, one of the byproducts of this is there's enough width within the right-of-way to accomplish this with some restriping, but it would be at the expense of some on-street parking. We're working through the geometry, and I don't think we've exactly got the measuring and the number of parking stalls right. We initially thought it might be as high as 18 to 20, and as we resurvey that, we think it might be as low as 12 stalls. Clearly, the northeast quadrant of this intersection is the village of Skokie, and the other three quadrants are the village of Lincolnwood, so we would need their participation. Steve and village staff has had some communication with the staff in the village of Lincolnwood. I also appeared before their village board at a committee of the whole meeting in December, introduced this and reviewed what we're proposing, fielded some initial comments, and then they asked their staff to review it in more detail. So we're in that process. And then the big thing is that Tui, as you know, is an IDOT street. So KLOA has submitted this to IDOT. We have had some ongoing conversations with IDOT, and they support most of it. The only pinch point that's an ongoing conversation, and we're working through the resolution, is whether or not they'll support that Tui curb cut entrance being a full access curb cut. That might, there was some comments of the left-hand out maneuver from the property turning eastbound on to Tui Avenue. They think that there's opportunity there at Hamlin, especially if we're able to create this left-hand turn lane, and then also via the cross-access point, which would provide a customer wanting to go eastbound on Tui to get over to the protection of the traffic signalization that was developed with the Walmart development.
So Steve's pointing with his pen, there's two access points. There's the easement driveway, and there's the driveway to the west that's entirely on the property. Are both of those questioning southbound exiting traffic going eastbound, or is one already restricted to westbound only? That's the one that's westbound only.
So the only one that's on our property
Right.
is the one at the western edge of our property, and then just east of the BP gas station, the car wash building. The other one is the one that is just to the west of Wendy's, and that's part of the Walmart development. So we don't control that. I do believe that they by the geometry of the pork chop there, if you will, they discourage a left turn lane out of there. So they're trying to do the same thing. They're suggesting that that might be appropriate for our property too. And Michael and Louis at KLOA are working through that with IDOT.
Pushing all the left turn traffic, all the exiting traffic that wants to go eastbound on Tui out to Hamlin.
They would have two options. They would either go to Hamlin or use the point of cross access into the Walmart development to get back to that protection of the traffic signalization. It's a little, it's not a direct path, but it does afford a patron the control of the traffic signalization.
Right, I just don't see, I see this being a very successful development. I hope it is for fellow fast food people. But I see a bad traffic backup for exiting Hamlin southbound traffic trying to turn east without a controlled intersection with no stoplight. We could have 20 cars stacking on Hamlin trying to turn left east onto Tui. And I don't think that'll work. And that's where they're all going to be forced to, because we're not letting them out the other driveways, and maybe they can't really fit on the other driveways. That was one concern I had. The other one was, I know this is part of the easement. It's not your property at all, but the area that is now currently occupied by what is to be the future cross easement driveway is loaded usually with semis that Walmart either allows or encourages or simply ignores. But there are semis parked in there in a linear fashion, further restricting and screwing up the traffic flow of this new cross-access development. Any comments about that? What have you
Yeah,
talked to
we,
Walmart about
we,
that?
we are sensitive to that, and we've noticed the same thing. It's, as it exists today, without these properties to the west being utilized, it is kind of a desolate area, and it is a convenient, staging for that activity. We did submit a copy of the documented cross-access easement to the village, and there are responsibilities for both parties and remedies so that this access point will not be blocked in the future. So we were sensitive, and we did address that in the document.
And then is there concern by your traffic people on a separate issue of this traffic now moving in an east-west fashion, coming across the easement, but shooting into that 20-stack drive-through at Bona Beef, which I'm all encouraging, it's success, but we have a significant traffic flow down that one parking aisle to get from Walmart and also the traffic control at Walmart to the Bona Beef stack line. That is one serious,
They're not aligned.
they're not exactly aligned, but that is the way that people from Walmart and from the traffic light will get to the Bona Beef stack.
I'll let Michael help address this. I'll just say one thing leading into that. So the drive-through that we were going to get to a little bit later in the discussion, as part of the special use, has the ability to stack approximately 17 cars. It's a little bit more than what we've experienced. We have 5 Bonas that have the dual lane order board that then merges to the pickup window. Bona is a little bit different from some restaurants that utilize a drive-through in that every order at Bona is made from the point of ordering, so the food isn't pre-made and then stacked. So what they also do is they utilize 3 staging stalls that are at along the west elevation of the Bona building, adjacent to Hamlin, as you lead back down to that access point. So we found that this helps us manage the flow of the traffic through that drive-through, and we don't get a lot of backup. So we think this was, and that was an early comment we got from staff, is, the sensitivity to if there was a backup in the drive-through, is it going to impact any of the roadways? And that's why we tried to bring it as internal to the site as possible. And then I'll let Michael speak to some of the other concerns.
Quick,
Good
your name for
evening.
the record, please? Yes,
Michael Worthman with KLOA.
thank you.
First of all, we are working with IDOT to try to keep that left turn out. You're correct that some people will use Hamlin, but we do feel that the easier way out is using the traffic signal, particularly during those peak periods when it's hard to get on the Toohey Avenue. You're going east anyway, so you're on that way. If you sit out there, you see a lot of people from the industrial area will come through and use that access. And that intersection has more than sufficient capacity. It's working at a very good level of service. There is a high volume of left turns, but it is working at a good capacity. Regarding your question of the internal circulation, we don't see a whole lot of issue with that. While we hope there is a lot of traffic from Walmart, it's going to be a fraction of the traffic that's going there. More importantly, the inbound traffic doesn't need to use the Walmart, so most of our inbound traffic will be coming in either through here or through Hamlin, which will eliminate some of that conflict. The other is Bona's peak period, or one of their peak period is at lunch, when Walmart is not as busy. You will have some peaks together on a weekend, but we don't see it as an issue.
Part of that's going to have to do with the traffic flow identified by the pylon sign. I noticed an 18-foot monument sign at the western driveway. On that one 18-foot monument sign is going to be all the identifiers for the medical building, Bona, and the other retail uses, so that it will then draw people to that one driveway.
Yeah, that's the intent. We're just going to have one monument sign, and we'll identify, we'll probably organize this as the lease negotiations have progressed. A third of this will be identifying the medical use. Approximately a third of it will be identifying Bona, and then a third will be left for the multi-tenant building.
And one more question, back to the Bona pullover. After they stack, and if there's food, if the food isn't ready yet, and the window is then, if they have passed the window, where will the pullover be? As you were involved in the Portillo's, which I was not involved in, I was not here at that time, but we all know that the Portillo's lot has challenges. It probably never should have been
Yeah.
allowed to be built as it was, much as I like Portillo's also. So what are we doing now to figure out, I see the stack, I see the cars stacking, and I'm hoping that they won't align too badly with the Walmart drive-through, but now how do they move away from the window, and where do they pull over for food to be run out from the inside?
So yeah, I'll just reiterate what Steve highlighted. It. So the drive-through queue is north of that drive aisle, aligned at the cross-access point. So we do think that we're outside of that geometry. And then what happens is the cars come through the drive-through, and from an operational standpoint, the busy times, as Michael mentioned, are the lunch weekday periods is actually the busiest time. So there's a couple of pros and cons with the Bona restaurant. They don't open until 10:30 a.m., so they miss all the morning rush activity and won't contribute to that. And then during the week, there's some traffic that isn't out on the street because they're at work or school or what have you. So we do think that there's some offsets there. So the way the drive-through functions is you have the two order boards, so you'll queue to those order boards, you'll place your order, you'll merge into the one lane, and then approach the drive-through window, which is that portion of the north elevation that's bumped out along the west edge of the building. And then if the order is not ready and the drive-through is full, then they start that staging period of the 3 stalls after the drive-through. So those vehicles make the turn. The curb line shown there is painted surface markings, so that if a car is not entering those 3 staging areas, they know to make a wider turn and then get in the bypass lane. And then if they're entering those, they can drive over that without driving up on a curb. And then they're staged in that area, and then along the west elevation of the building, there's an operable door to where the employee would then bring that food out to that customer, hand it off, and then they proceed out. So it helps them with that process, so that they're trying to accomplish 2 things, so that we don't have excessive stacking happening, and then from a patron perspective, they're always kind of in motion and it's fluid, and they're not stuck there. That perception of convenience is part of the drive-through too.
Question? I kind of share Scott's concerns, because everyone will think, well, it's impossible to make a left-hand turn on Hamlin and then the other access street. I'm going to make my way through the Walmart parking lot and use that light. And, from my experience, the Walmart parking lot, especially on the weekends, it's like the Wild West in that parking lot. And everyone's trying to get to that light so they can make, turn left mainly to move on. I've actually had to fight my way to Chase Avenue, fight my way out of the lot to Chase Avenue and negotiate my way home via Chase. So I just want to share that concern. And I don't know what policy is on more lights on TUI to allow for some of these safety turns. There's probably too many already to allow for TUI to flow. I don't know, but it's a concern.
KLOA did note in their report that the distance from the light that was brought in that aligns with Lawndale and the Walmart development is a little under. And Michael, I don't recall that dimensional measurement, what the preference of IDOT is, but maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, you got 2 issues here. One is the proximity to the existing signal, And two is the volumes probably don't warrant, you got to have a certain volume of traffic to warrant it. And three, with the cross-access, it will indicate you have access to a traffic signal, so. You know, the one thing nice about this site and some of your concerns is it's not a direct line from Walmart into the site. You kind of have to come across, thank you, Steve, and then make the turn and come back in. So it will try to slow down that raceway, which I think you're talking about, and help smooth. And even as you come up, you have to come back down again to get to that aisle. So sort of like a chicane within that parking lot that will help calm the traffic through there. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I have the floor for 1 second?
Yes.
Just to talk about this a little bit. So what they were describing, this parking lot for Walmart was actually designed by staff in order to prevent everybody rushing from all directions into the light, to force and channelize traffic into a certain circulation pattern and avoid people cutting through the drive aisles. So that was thought out ahead of time. This is a continuation of that pattern, and it also has those similar jogs to stop those people from being able to gain speed. And so, just for the record, I just wanted to point that out. The other issue was the light distance. This alignment of Lawndale, which was pre-existing on the Lincolnwood side, is off the grid. It's too much to the west than it should be, which causes that shorter distance between that and what would be the next section line or half section line, quarter section line, which would be Hamlin. So there is a shorter distance there than would normally be if everything was spaced a quarter mile apart.
Yeah, I appreciate the design of Walmart. I mean, it chops everything up and keeps people from going long distances to get where they need to go in the lot without any obstruction. But you make this turn, oh, that's backed up. You go down here, you want to make another, oh, that's backed up. And, you know, you're trying to figure out how to get out of the lot.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, there's one other a different question about parking. When you talked about the medical center having discussions with staff and with the tenant as to whether that main entrance was going to be west-facing or south-facing, give us a little more detail on that, because obviously the greater amount of parking is to the south and not to the west.
So I think there's two things that they shared with us from their design of the interior function of this medical facility, and that was that a portion was going to be operating as physician offices, seeing patrons, and then a portion was going to be clinical in nature and some more service, the x-ray and that type of stuff. So they wanted to segregate those and have a larger waiting area. They felt that that worked better if the orientation was the main entrance at about the midpoint of that building on the west elevation. And then, yes, as you identified, they also felt that that maybe gave them a more equal distribution of available parking as it was orientated to that what will be their main entrance. So just a couple other brief comments here. On the signage that we reviewed with the Appearance Commission and they supported, there was 3 points of relief. Within the packet is the sign criteria designed by OKW that will function as individual channel letters mounted onto the facade of the buildings above an opportunity for some decorative awnings. So the first point of relief is relief from the sign code is required from the sign package as shown, including the number of signs per facade, again, because of the multiple facade buildings, and then the lettering mounted above the canopy. The second point of relief is section 8222B1 to allow sign lettering to project above the physical dimension of the canopy, just the orientation again of the design. And then with the decorative steel Bona letter signs on that metal canopy. And then the third point of relief is section 8228B1 to allow wall signs facing the parking lot in addition to the wall signs facing the street frontages. again, because of the orientation of some of the buildings and what's happening internally to the parking. So then, just a few brief comments in conclusion. The public utilities, the existing public utilities are adequately sized to serve the proposed development. The utility services for the new construction buildings will all be entirely constructed and located underground. The removal of the existing overhead utility, which extends east from Hamlin along our southern property line, just north of the BP, will require a new electrical service feed to the BP gas station. So we're working with those folks to coordinate that, and with ComEd. The stormwater detention has part of the comprehensive redevelopment of the site, and this will be a 100% new site improvements throughout the entire site. Will include a stormwater detention system designed to code, which includes a stormwater detention vault to be located under the parking lot. Again, that'll be within that center parking field identified as Lot 2 on the new proposed subdivision, with a restricted outflow to the existing Village of Skokie sewer main in Chase Avenue. And then finally, the two special uses, again, a special use for the drive-through. Bona Restaurants is proposing a drive-through component to the restaurant operation. The proposed drive-through is located at the north side of the restaurant building and provides adequate queuing stacking for a capacity of 17 vehicles to the point of the pickup window, and then the 3 staging areas that we had some discussion about. As noted in the staff report, we will include do not enter signs to make it clear that we don't get traffic entering that point of exiting the drive-through. And then the special use for the outdoor dining, Bona Restaurants is proposing an outdoor dining area located along the southern elevation of the restaurant, just east of their entranceway. This is entirely controlled at the only point of ingress into that area is from within the restaurant, so the patron will get their food and then enter into that outdoor dining area. Per code, there is an emergency egress point there, but that's gated and secured. The outdoor dining area typically accommodates approximately 20 patrons during the weather permitting season. And then there were some conditions in the staff report too that we concur with in terms of the limitation of the hours and the seasons for that outdoor area. So that, I guess, concludes our overview presentation.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll have the staff present its report to the commission. Staff being Steve Marciani. Again, Steve, why don't you just lump everything together and just kind of give us an overview?
Sure. I would like to enter all 5 reports into the record as presented.
Is granted.
And then I would like to thank Mr. Hague for doing our presentation and ask you if you have any questions. I have one thing to add, actually. Condition, there's one additional condition which was left out, which is a condition we have been using that's become fairly standard for the site plan approval case, and that's the standard condition regarding tenant choices on the part of the developer do not constitute a hardship for the purpose of zoning. Specifically because of the circumstance we might be running into, I just want to make sure that's included and request that that condition, as that has been stated in previous cases, be added as a condition to case 4.
Can I ask a question for a second? The presentation or
the elevation for the medical building, was that the same one that was presented to the Appearance Commission? Because it appears to be different than the ones where the signage is shown on. And it has towers on the edge, which the ones that I remember did not. So I just want to be sure for the record that it's the correct.
Yeah, so that was done in 2 processes. So the west and the southern elevations, as depicted on this drawing from OKW, were the ones initially presented and worked through with the Appearance Commission. So yes, and then subsequently, when we, through the process of the interest from the medical facility, figured out that they were going to have a slightly reduced footprint and the creation of that new northern elevation, their preference was to do something very similar to what that southern elevation was. So we came back to last Wednesday night's Appearance Commission and reviewed that, and they supported it. So the answer to that is yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Steve?
I have questions. First question is the staff satisfied with the entries to the medical building, be it customer, patient entries, and also service entries? Because it would seem that if there were the correct adjustment of entryways, different service doors, different ways for different people to access the building, then the parking would spread itself around the building. If in fact all of the access is on the western elevation, in the center of the western elevation, we're trying to cram all of the patients and providers into this narrow aisle of parking. Assuming it's a medical building, there's going to be many more than 2 handicap spaces required. And they're not going to be at the corner where they're shown now, which is at the southwest corner. They're going to be centered. So there's going to be 20 handicap spaces smack in the middle of that narrow aisle. And then there's going to be no parking for anybody else except to push them over to Bona Beef and then walk half a block.
So the medical building was a last-minute addition to this, so we understand that that is the case. This circumstance is solved by making the employees park in the central portion above the stormwater detention over here. We don't know where the door is going to be yet, so I can't make that decision. The only thing that we're want to just be cognizant of is to make sure where the loading dock goes, because that is not contemplated. Currently, the loading dock comes off the street in a portion of the building that's being torn down. But that adjustment needs to be made. People will learn behaviors, and this goes to the broader questions about how people get in and out. Once you've done something once or twice, you find the easiest way. Just like I ate at the Jimmy John's tonight at Sienna, and I sat facing Skokie Boulevard in that part that was carved out for me to look out the windows of the back, so it was reserved. I actually think the parking lot there works very well because it forces those businesses to turn over their product very quickly and get their customers in and out. So I have never once not been able to find a parking space there.
True.
So yes, it is a rather full parking lot, but those cars do turn.
It's the stack at Portillo's that was never designed.
Correct, and they have made manual adjustments by putting staff out there to keep that thing moving. So, putting all those other things aside now, at this point, I don't have concerns about the parking situation at this facility. You know, I can't make circular buildings with evenly spaced parking spaces all equidistant from the door, no matter what we do. I mean, that just doesn't happen in our dimension. So I'm not concerned about that.
Okay, and is the staff going to recommend that there be no left turns out of those 2 driveways, one on the property and one the common easement, so that it forces all the left turns to Hamlin and to the stoplight?
I don't think staff has a position about that because IDOT's going to dictate that. I mean, there is one thing that is different from this entrance to the one that's by the Wendy's is that it is further away from the traffic light. So that the fact that it's farther might change IDOT's position. I don't know. This is one of those things that's not in our control. I mean, we tried to do all this stuff ahead of time when we did the Mariano's development, and then IDOT went ahead and changed everything, and then they went ahead and changed it again last minute. So our position is to let IDOT do their thing, and they will have to accept whether or not that's acceptable to them.
They, the developers,
The developer,
and
yeah.
we, the village.
And we, the
will all
village, will
have to
take
accept
it, yeah.
Okay,
So,
I understand.
Again, Steve, in case 4, you said you want to add a condition for, what again?
we have a standard condition that we've been putting in a lot of the multi-tenant buildings recently that, and I'm paraphrasing this, and we'll use whatever the language we have been using, but it's a statement that the petitioner acknowledges that tenant choices on their part are a self-imposed hardship. So if they choose to over-tenant something, and then because they put in a restaurant in 3,500 square feet, and then they're going to ask for relief for the next user to go in, or vice versa, that the answer to that is no. That they need to make smart tenant choices that don't create that, because here there is no place for the overflow parking to go because there is no on-street parking. We've been doing this starting with the Jack's development, because of those tenant choices, and this is the exact situation they're in right now because of the tenant choices. They have a vacancy because they over-tenanted the building. The same thing happened at Grosse Pointe Road and Dempster Street. In the beginning, when they had a physical therapy place in there and 4 restaurants, and they were not allowed to fill the northern portion of the building on Grosse Pointe Road because of that. That's not our problem, that's their problem, because they chose tenants, and this has some high parking users, and that they will just need to make those adjustments. And it's just a standard, it's not something that's necessarily enforceable per se, because there's supposed to be a self-imposed hardship is not supposed to be granted a variance in the first place. But this is actually taking away their right to make that application because they're acknowledging that it's a self-imposed hardship.
One other question. Does the cross easement that's being discussed include employee parking so that employees and staff of both Bona, the medical center, can park then at the outer reaches of the Walmart lot, which is the least important for Walmart shoppers if they were to park over by Wendy's?
It is not our understanding that that's the case, but I'll let the petitioner address that. I will point out that the parking lot for Walmart is beyond what the requirement is for that use.
It works.
But I'll let.
That's what I'm thinking, if we could make that part of the cross easement so that the employees of this new overloaded development, which seemed to me a little bit overloaded, could also park at the edge of the Walmart, which is not heavily used over at its western edge. It would please everyone.
Unfortunately, it does not include that. And that conversation was a short conversation with Walmart.
In general, we can't guarantee that all these users are going to be the same over time. So it's generally not staff's position to make one development's parking dependent on someone else's development. So
I'm reminded of a much smaller example, but one that gets discussed frequently, and that is the Dunkin' Donuts Pizza Inn before Pizza Inn moved to its new Pita Palace, when it was the former Pizza Inn, now Zeb, and there was lots of tension between the users for what we had, for what we in the village thought was to be common access parking, both for patrons and employees.
yeah, and it's my understanding that that was actually a private agreement, Pete. Is that true?
Yes, there were numerous property owners, and it was one development at one time, and it was divided up into individual lots. But the common parking was still there, and the common drives.
And the common parking for whoever wanted to use it. But that is not the case in this case, we are being told.
That's
Now, if that development were to happen today, it would be under a planned development. The development you're referring to on Deptford Street.
But this planned development is 2 separate planned developments, one being the new one and one being the Walmart, and they are not intersecting other than their common driveway, they're not intersecting in terms of.
And it was our
their-
intention when we designed this that there would be, although we didn't write it into that ordinance, which is why they had to go back and do it, was to allow access, just like it was our intention by the Chick-fil-A to allow access to the south, but then they denied that access because we did not put it into the development, which is why that driveway was put along the property line.
And, forgive me for being a broken record, but I thought we had agreed that on drive-throughs and food establishments, that we were going to require trash receptacles at the end of the drive-throughs, even in the staff reports.
I think
Those are in the conditions.
the conditions in there for the drive-through.
Was it?
Yeah, I checked it. There's one inside the outdoor dining, there's one at the end of the drive-through, and we usually require one at the door also.
Okay, and there's a 4-hour requirement for every 4 hours to police the property to make sure?
Yes. that was-
Okay, then I missed that, so I apologize. And then what about
That's condition number 8,
the,
7 and 8. 6,
anything
7, 8.
about, any issues about the drive-through at night in terms of lighting or sound?
The sound provision is in there, and it'll be lit as part of the overall shopping center.
Yeah, it's mostly smack up against a wall right now. Not that that's going to be there in the future, but the existing condition is that there's a wall on the property line to the north.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff?
Just one question. What does the staff think is the number of employees that will be using this 260-car parking lot?
I don't know, because I don't know who all the users are.
But isn't that part of our zoning determination tonight to decide whether this development goes forward? I'm assuming.
The answer to that is no. You're not making a parking determination tonight. So tonight, we are saying that there are 260, based off of the proportions of the uses that they presented, they're providing 260 spaces. They are showing 260 spaces, although we know that it will probably be reduced somewhat. The other thing is, since we don't know the tenants in A, there have been no deductions taken out of those, so this would be the worst case scenario based on those particular uses.
I think we ought to clarify that we always go by square footage, not
Yeah.
by employees.
Yeah, not everything is by
because
employees.
We never know what the employees will be. It could go up or down, depending on the usage or even their shifts and things like that. So it's always best to go by square footage that we know is a standard that we can.
There
follow.
are a few uses that do have those kinds of requirements, and it's like schools or things like that. Some of them are like that, but we've been trying to eliminate those, or else we have to keep track of everyone's employment on a regular basis, which we really don't want to be
All right,
doing.
my last question. Will we have stepped up enforcement now for the semis that are parking along that side? The reason I'm stuck on all of this, I think we're cramming too much into one small area. I think there's going to be 100 employees in the medical center, which is great, and there's going to be 30 or 40 at Buena at a busy time, another 20, 30. So I got 150, 160 employees at the peak time of all operation, which doesn't leave much for patrons. But wouldn't be bad if all of these employees, or many of them, parked along the easement on the Walmart side because the semis weren't there. But if it's our responsibility as a village to keep semis from parking there, then maybe we have dropped that responsibility in the past, and maybe we should pick it up in the future. Can we write that in as a requirement, that there will be strenuous enforcement of no long-term semi-parking along the east facade of this development?
It's off the site that you're under consideration for, so I would say that you could not do that as part of this case. We do have an ordinance that says that all vehicles must be parked in legal parking spaces, so technically, I guess, those are illegal. To the best of my knowledge, we have not gotten a complaint about it, which is probably we haven't gone out and enforced
Yeah,
them.
as the developer said,
Yeah.
that's probably because
Yeah.
it's all been vacant.
But yes, technically, those semis that are parking across parking space lines are illegally parked. But I do not believe we have, through this case, have the right to put a restriction on a neighboring property. And council can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I'll concur.
Okay, thank you.
Then last thing on that, we do have the right, though, to say that the access easement will always remain open, so that if the semis park where they are now, which would be to block that cross easement driveway, that would be violating this development.
Well, it would be violating the site plan, so I don't know.
Which site plan?
The site plan that we would be approving.
Tonight, by parking across the driveway on the other side. It's outside of this development
The Walmart
geography.
site plan approval also states you cannot block aisles, you
Yes.
cannot block drives. So they would be under the same requirement, and it would be enforced through the Property Standards Division, not by the police. And we would, if it became an issue, we would have somebody out there and looking at it. But again, Walmart's policy has always been, I see some RVs out there sometimes, I see some trucks. They accommodate that because they know,
And right now, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's going to matter soon, hopefully. Okay. I'll be the one to call in.
Any other questions of staff? Thank you, Steve. Mr. Hay, would you please step back up to the podium? You've heard staff request an additional recommendation to case 2019-04. Do you have any problems with that
No,
request?
that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you'd like to add before we?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who wish to come up and have a question or a comment? Okay, I guess not. Okay. All right. We are ready for motion for case 2019-02P, the zoning map amendment at 3722 and 7227 Hamlin. Do I have a motion? Motion to agree.
And I'll second it.
Jeff, okay. Jeff Berman moves.
Jeff Berman moved and I second.
That's right, okay. Okay, call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell is absent. Commissioner Quinn,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Luxpati.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Matei.
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Thank you. In case 2019-03P, the subdivision at 3722E, 7227 Hamlin, and 3721 Chase. Do I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Luxpati, thank you. And second? To Commissioner Berman, thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Quain,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Luxpati,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. In case 2019-04P, this is with the additional requirement by staff. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Commissioner Franklin, do I have a second? Commissioner Matei, thank you. Okay. Call for the vote. Commissioner Quain,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Luxpati,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
now vote aye. Okay, moving along. This is case 2019-05P, special use permit for, this is for the drive-through, right? 3754 Tui. Do I have a motion to, Commissioner Luxpati, Commissioner Jeff, Scott Berman, thank you. Call for the vote. Commissioner Quain,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas,
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin,
Aye.
Commissioner Luxpati,
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman,
Aye.
Commissioner Matei,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. And final case 2019-06P, this is special use permit for outdoor dining. Do I have a motion to approve?
Cindy brings up a question.
Yes.
I apologize. I read it all, but did we actually talk about the outdoor dining?
Yes, she just mentioned it. I
Okay,
glossed it over. I mean, it was,
okay.
if you have any questions about it, you can ask now.
No, I didn't.
I had one question, actually. I'm glad you reminded me. And that was merely, what was the number of seats on the outdoor dining? But it's,
It was
20.
okay, thanks. Sorry. It's fine.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. So do I have a motion to approve?
I'll approve.
Commissioner Jeff Berman, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Scott Berman. Call for the vote. Commissioner Quain.
Aye.
Commissioner Scott Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Villegas.
Aye.
Commissioner Franklin.
Aye.
Commissioner Luxpati.
Aye.
Commissioner Jeff Berman.
Aye.
Commissioner Matei.
Aye.
Now vote aye. Motion passes. And any other business before the commission? There are none. This meeting's adjourned. And good luck with your project.